The What's Neat This Week podcast is supported by enthusiastic model railroaders just like you. Additional support is provided by Athearns Trains. Check out all the new monthly announcements at athearns.com. Additional support is also provided by Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Check them out. Their website is ohrtracksupply.com. Thank you very much, Jeff Otto, for your support. You said it was St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day?
St. Patty's Day.
Chris, and you're going to give us, and this is number 17, right? And
what?
Everybody's recording?
Number 29. It's March 17th.
Somebody 29. Give a countdown.
Chris.
And let's just launch into this.
Here we go. Starting the countdown. 3, 2.
This is the What's Neat This Week podcast for Saturday, March 17th. Podcast number 29. It's also, what day is it? St. Patrick's Day. Here's some green for St. Patrick's Day.
That looks like a thing of broccoli there, Ken.
Sounds good, Chris. My name is Ken Patterson, the host of the What's Neat show over at Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine. And tonight I've got with me Chris Palomares, Michael Buddy, Ken Byrd, otherwise known as my father, and Dirk Reynolds running camera number 1 and camera number 2. There's nobody by it tonight. We've got a lot of new news that's come out this week in the hobby. Jason over at Rapido has announced that they've received a new pre-production model of their painted N-scale turbo train. Comes with sound and lighting, and he had it running for a special video that you can see on their YouTube site. It's a really magnificent looking paint job. It looks great in Amtrak. Also this week, what did we do, Chris? We shot an Athearns photograph with the great big city. We set it up outside this week. And we are trying to replicate the shot that we've done once before using 3 new engines that are in stock at Athearns. And what engines were those you asked me to use, Chris?
They were the FEF, the Northern Pacific SPNS 4664 Challenger, and then the original Challenger, which you kind of been working with. And you have some more info on that, too.
It's pretty neat. It was a wonderful day. The weather has just started to get really nice here. So I'm looking forward to doing an awful lot more outdoor good photo shoots now coming up where we can start backing them up day to day. I'm looking forward to that. Now, last week on the show, we had Chris Marasco, the military modeler, as you'll recall. And a lot of great readers' feedback on him. And yes, you will see him on the What's Neat show. But he gave me a Tamiya airbrush because I had a problem. I had to paint the fronts of these Athearns QSA 1s and 2s because we got 4 of them from China where the fronts had to be painted to match the side of the boiler right at the front smoke box. And so I wanted to match that gray paint. But the key is this airbrush that Chris gave me was a Tamiya airbrush. It was a very fine spraying airbrush. It's in their SprayWorks line. And I used it to paint the front of these locomotives without really using masking tape. Again, using the lighter fluid trick that we talked about last week on the show when I did the track cleaning car from Korea Brass. Well, this week I actually had to use that lighter fluid trick for a job where we wanted these engines to look absolutely fantastic. And as you can see, after I was done painting the front of the locomotive with the airbrush, I then just wiped it off with the paintbrush with a little lighter fluid, daubing it on a paper towel until the black parts no longer had any gray on them. But the airbrush was so fine, it really remedied that. So Chris, look forward to that photograph when we shoot those engines. Now, you wanted to talk about something tonight, Chris.
Yeah, kind of looking back, and we've had some feedback how we started the podcast. We'd always present, well, I shouldn't say always, but we frequently would present a topic for us to all kind of weigh in on. And the topic I picked tonight is if we had to do it all over again or make a recommendation for a starting point into the hobby, what would those recommendations do from all the lessons that we've learned so far?
You mean like what would we do if we're going to do it all over again knowing what we know now?
You betcha.
Would I even get into the hobby?
That's a question for you to answer there, Ken. I'd like to know.
Yes. What do you think, Mike? Dirk, you're back there. What do you think?
Yeah, you mean scale and everything, huh?
Yeah, scale and everything. How would you... where would you start?
Well, I think everybody starts trying to model what they see in the current day, you know?
Yeah.
And I started seriously modeling at around age 14 in 1968 when Penn Central was the newest, hottest thing. 50 years ago, I can't believe it.
All right.
Anyway, I always, consider myself a modern modeler, and all through the 70s and 80s, I was keeping up with everything, and I started realizing that my old stuff was all brand new. I started realizing I had to focus on something, so
Right.
I ended up focusing on one particular era because I knew I couldn't keep up with everything that was new. I finally gave up around 1990, and I decided to focus on 78. So I think maybe I would advise somebody to right away to try and focus on a certain thing rather than just buy every car that says Santa Fe because they like Santa Fe, and otherwise you'll end up with a lot of equipment that you may never use.
Right.
So, but I don't know. I dabbled in N scale, and my first train was an O gauge train, but HO to me is the perfect scale. So I don't think I would change scales at all.
Okay.
So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would go one module at a time. I know that. I would not
Yeah.
build a whole layout. I would start with a
Right.
module.
Right.
You said knowing what I know now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would start with a module, and I would perfect my skills on the module because I'm assuming. Well, do I know what I know now with skills too? I mean, gee whiz. I'd probably be doing just what I'm doing now. To be honest with you, what would I be doing that's different? I don't think I would do anything different, Chris.
Okay.
It would have been nice.
You got anything else to weigh in on before I
If you
start
had to
chiming
build
in
a whole
on
new
mine?
layout, what would you do?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm in the process of building a new layout
Yeah.
right now. And I'm sticking with, even though my failing eyesight requires O gauge, I'm sticking with HO.
Yeah.
And I'm using a lot of the more modern materials today than what we had back in the old days. But I'm still modeling that era that influenced me the most between 1940 and 1960, which some steam was still involved, and then all of the Class 1 railroads. We had about 3 or 4 dozen Class 1 railroads in those days.
Right.
Today we got 4 or 5.
Right.
So that's I'm still going to stick with modeling that particular era, which keeps Athearn in business because our old guys are buying these old models they're coming out with. So, but I'm going to use new techniques. A lot of the foam stuff that Ken's done has influenced me. I'm going to be using a lot of that. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm going.
Now, you've done a lot of building before. I remember as a kid growing up, I saw your layout in the city with the trestle that you had built.
Yes.
And I showed that in a video that I ran on my history some point. I'm sure folks have seen that.
I did a
but
lot
you've
of-
recently just torn down a layout, is that right?
And I've done a lot of scratch building. You don't see a lot of scratch building today in the hobby.
Right.
You see people doing a lot of kit bashing because you got all these fantastic
Yeah,
plastic
right.
kits you can use. But I still scratch build, and I scratch build in a material that very few people use, Strathmore, which is a pressed paper product that artists use.
That's how you built this roundhouse,
I
isn't
built-
it?
I built
You got
Yeah.
those parts laid out here on the
roundhouse.
table. I
And
see that.
I have built a couple of museum models of depots.
Is that
using
train
Strathmore.
station that we see here? And
Yeah.
you're building that out of Strathmore as well. Now,
But-
I'm going to have to look up Strathmore and see what that is.
You go to your local.
Isn't it like what they
Department
used
store.
to put a mat around
That's
a
right.
picture?
Exactly. If you mat a picture, you use Strathmore.
Right.
Now, the technique is you cut it out using an X-Acto knife, using your plan. You cut it out, then you spray both sides of it with automotive primer, and that waterproofs it, and it'll last
So it won't
forever.
warp.
Okay.
It will not warp. It'll last forever.
Now, you said you just tore down a layout. Did you tear down that trestle you built, or did you save the trestle?
No, I saved the trestle.
Is
I
that
didn't tear
piece
it
by
down.
piece built out of wood?
Piece by piece. I used a
That's a
jig.
nice model.
I used a jig for that. Yeah.
Good job.
Yep. What I'm doing is I downsized the layout. It originally was 8 by 18 feet, 2 levels, and it became a maintenance issue for me. I'm not a young guy anymore. So I'm condensing it down to 6 by 18 feet, single level, so I can just run trains and put the models on the layout and enjoy them that way.
Chris, did you say what you would do different?
Well, the first thing that I would kind of recognize is the big hole in my collection of old stuff I wouldn't have to deal with anymore. Starting fresh, you kind of end up with a lot of the newer equipment and a lot of the higher fidelity detailed stuff if you choose to go that route. I think that my entrance point into the hobby would probably revolve around starting with a very small foam shelf kind of around the walls
That makes sense.
I'd stick with Kato Unitrack or some sort of quick snap together track type product, and I would be okay with that. As it exists right now, there's a lot of complexity when you start getting into track products and things like that, and just the struggle to fun is exponentially kind of cut in half when you use sort of like a Kato Unitrack product, and you could be up and running pretty much in a day with that. And then you can try out different track arrangements too in real time, and then sort of gravitate towards the one that you want and start, looking at going with cork roadbed or whatever kind of roadbed you'd like to use, and then maybe some flex track and other products start going that way. Not kind of going into any sort of DCC or back technology, but I think right now there's also a lot of really cool things that, if you were starting all over again, you could start picking up the newer technology and wouldn't have to think about installing 100 decoders into old blue box or older type locomotives, old Atlas ones or anything like that. So,
Chris, that's my problem. I've got over 100 locomotives. Most of them are either Atlas or your old blue box stuff. I have bought some new Athearn though with DCC ready, but I'm not DCC yet. I'm looking at it, but I haven't gone there yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're in the right crowd. We know how to lead you down that path now. We've had a lot of questions about that. We're getting an education on it. We've got the new system coming out from Loke Sound. I can't wait to see that system. Plus, NCE's got a pretty nice system. We've talked a lot about that on the show, and I look forward to what we're going to talk about on the show. This might be a good time to say that Oak Hill Model Aero Track Supply, our friend Jeff Otto, helps sponsor this podcast, the What's Neat This Week podcast, with his hand-laying track products, these jigs that allow you to lay crossovers, essentially saving time to build your track, put it in position on the layout rather than just hand laying it on the layout. I feel like I say that all the time, but check it out. OHR Track Supply is the website to go to for that. And also I'd like to thank Chris Palomares at Athearn for being the sponsor, also for the podcast. And at the beginning of the show, you always get to see what's latest and new on the Athearn website.
Yeah, one of the latest things in this month is the American Car and Foundry ACF 4,600 cubic foot covered hopper. We're doing the 1965 body variant, and what's key about that 1965 body variant is the high brake wheel and the side ladder. That's just never been done in any sort of model in plastic. It might have been done in brass, I'm just not sure, but there's a lot of classic road names, a lot of, and it lasts all the way up until the early 2000s too. They went on to BNSF, UP with different paint configurations and stuff. So it really had a lot of longevity as far as a freight car designed, and quite honestly, I think you could still see some of the later body style of the post-1971s out there.
You actually measured this car, didn't you?
Well, what happened is there was a lot of customer feedback for us to kind of take another look, a really hard look at the accuracy of this model compared to the prototype, and we did. Kind of delivered to us like on a silver platter. Over anyone familiar with Horizon Hobby might also know that there's an airfield over in Champaign, Illinois, actually Monticello, and for the people that don't know, the Horizon Hobby has like this facility out there in Monticello, Illinois for, doing test flights and hosting certain events. And right next to it is the Monticello Railroad Museum, and doing kind of short story long here. We were delivered by accident and by chance, two late body 4600s, the ACF 4600 center flows were stored in car storage over at the Monticello Railroad Museum. They also do car storage there too. And it was right next to Eli Field. So we just talked to the Monticello Railroad Museum, and they were happy to have us come on. And we went just when we had a break in the weather, and we were able to measure those cars, climb all over them, get some of the critical dimensions that some of our customers were really concerned about. And we were really able to nail this car to the wall. We went back and completely retooled it based upon the information that we had. So we're really excited. It's taken a little bit longer for the late body style. The early 1965 Aero one was a lot more on the money. So we decided to do another run of that. And coincidentally, it just sort of so happened there was nothing else out there on the market of the early body style. So the latest run in this month of the ACF 4600, the secret ingredient is that 1965 body style. We're bringing out the Pennsylvania Railroad, CB&Q. There's a new Burlington design. There's also a few others, including Union Pacific and Burlington Northern Santa Fe. So go on over there and check out all the different. Go onto our website at athearns.com and check out all the new releases for this month.
Now, Chris, were those cars, the prototype, were they modified in the 70s with lower brake wheels and,
Perhaps. I'd say, Mike, a few were, but, quite honestly, there's a number of them that were not. You can still see Burlington Northern Santa Fe with they cut the rungs off the side ladder, but it still had that high brake wheel on there on the end. So talk about longevity for a freight car.
Right. Okay.
I got 3 more things on the list here. I want to blow through these quick, and then we'll get to what Mike has brought here, some nice models tonight. First of all, Gerald Styles. You'll remember Gerald Styles. He works at the Caboose in Lakewood, Colorado. And he was the one that was in that ON30 layout that we had in What's Neat. I think it was last month, a beautiful ON30 layout. But Gerald sent us some really neat photographs of one of his latest projects, which was something where he took an N-scale Atlas Shay and he converted it over into an HON30 narrow gauge locomotive. Now, HON30 is something that would run on N-scale track. Yeah. So it's really a neat model that he had that he did what he did. Good job on this, Gerald. I think it was really neat. Also, I want to give a shout out to, and you're going to have to help me with John's last name, John Azolla. Did I say that right? John Azolla. He is the TSG Multimedia. He's got a podcast that he does. I've been watching some of his shows over the past 6 months. And I just want to say the latest video that he came out with was a Western Pacific layout. It was Jim Diaz's layout. Era 1938 Western Pacific. Wow. And I got to tell you, hats off on the editing on that video. Super nice work, John. I can feel your pain. I know what you went through, but it really came out fantastic. When you look at the model work mixed in with the prototype photos, very well put together interview, so you just deserve a hats off on that, and I wanted to give it to you. Robert Moore sent me some photographs this week through my email, and he says he uses these collectible pins that a lot of us get in the hobby, and he likes the ones that have manufacturers' names on them, like the Soundtracks or the Athearn one, and he uses them to make building signs, as you can see from these photographs that he sent us. And that takes care of my list. Mike, what do you got going on?
I just brought a few more vehicles in keeping with my automotive theme here. These are weathered vehicles, are, used vehicles. Most of the time, we're tempted to have our cars real nice and shiny. And these are, since my era is around 77 through 79, these 60s vehicles are, look like everyday drivers with a little bit of rust on the top of them, some dents, primer spots, stuff like that.
Patina.
Yeah, right. But it shows that a little bit of weathering on your vehicles, too, can go a long way towards realism, as well as weathering your rolling stock. These are some trailers, scratch-built piggyback trailers I did weathering on also. And then this truck here is a cab, resin casting by Greg Dixon in Pittsburgh. He sent me one of those, and I finished that up and tried a little, rusty, weather-beaten look on it. And so I thought I'd bring those tonight and show you how they look.
It looks fantastic, Mike. Just the fact that you would weather up your cars rather than have them look auto-rack clean ready like we're so used to seeing all the time, which was half the process just to make them look clean. But Look at you. Patina. Hey, there's an Aero Train on the table here. And that's because I started this project 7 years ago. And go white on this, Dirk. The fact is, with the Aero Train, it was a project I was going to do for Mainline Modeler, and then I told Joe over at Model Road Hobbyist Magazine that I would eventually do the article with him, which I've never done it with anybody. And this was as you look here, they're back to back. This is prototypically accurate because they actually ran it one day like that in 1964, and once I saw it, I had to have it that way. So not just 10 cars, 20 cars behind it, double-headed engines. Beautiful. Runs fantastic. But I've got a picture of you, Dad, standing next to the actual prototype Aero Train, probably when you were very younger than me.
That picture was taken in January of 1956 when the Aero Train came to St. Louis on tour. And I went down there with the parents and my girlfriend at the time, whose name was Janet Hoff. That's the first time I saw the Aero Train. And I saw it later in my years when it ran in Chicago on the Rock Island as a commuter train.
Commuter train, right.
Yeah. And that was an interesting experiment by General Motors, but a bunch of bus bodies connected together just didn't make it for comfort.
It was a rough ride, I hear.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It's amazing when you get to see photographs like that of models that we modeled way back when, but somebody's standing next to it. Yeah. I've got this photograph of Pat Patterson, that's my grandfather, standing next to the M1000. That Union Pacific train was at 1938, I think it was. I don't know the dates for sure. But how cool it is. And here's another photograph of Pat and his wife, Elsie, standing next to a Bachmann 440. Well, not really. It looks like it's a Burlington. But, this had to have been like 100 years ago. It's amazing to see family pictures, and it would be very interesting to see what family pictures you guys might have in your shoe boxes. You can email them to us or put them on our readers. I don't know. Can you put pictures on YouTube? Yeah. But it'd be really cool to see what's out there in the world of really old photographs of you and your family standing next to really cool trains that we like to model. It's just something I wanted to bring up in the show since you were here. We had that shot.
Appreciate it. Can I talk about these pictures?
Please do, Mike.
Yeah. These are some pictures that Ken Byrd took in 1969.
And I've got these shots on the computer, so I can put these on the screen.
But of an auto rack train full of 1969 Chevelles.
The train was approaching what we call the City Bridge across Mississippi River, and near the Ralston Farina Company. And those tracks no longer exist, unfortunately, many of them. But the bridge is still in use today. Mm-hmm. And Alton and Southern, I think they're still in business.
Yes.
Still running.
They got tunnel motors now.
Mm-hmm.
But, Alton and Southern, I've been thrown off of that property once or twice.
Those are the days when you could see the cars in the auto racks before people
I built a large-scale model using those for inspiration.
That's magnificent. And, I'm flattered. That's really beautiful.
We've had that on here before. I'll bring that in when the weather's
Mike does great work.
Set it up, but,
he's an artist.
But anyway, thanks for taking these pictures.
I never realized they'd be on a podcast someday.
Yeah, well, you never know.
Now, before we close it out, you've got a book here. It looks like you brought.
Let me plug my book.
What do you do here?
Rails to the Osage. This book is on the story of the Missouri Pacific branch line that used to run between Sedalia and Warsaw, Missouri, built in 1880 as a narrow gauge line.
Oh, really?
And it wasn't standard gauge until 1902. And this is available at the Missouri Pacific Historical Society website, mopac.org.
Listen to you.
And you can get them there. And this has been out a number of years, but it was a real hot seller, and it attracted a lot of interest. And there's a little interesting chapter back there about a fellow here in St. Louis who actually built a model of the layout. So you'll see that in there. The other thing I want to plug real quick is in Sedalia. I happen to be the chairman of the Sedalia Rails train show, which will be held on November the 3rd of this year, the first weekend in November, at the Liberty Park Convention Center in Sedalia. Sedalia is a very historic railroad town, both the Missouri Pacific shops through there. The Katy ran through there and had shops. And now it's home to the Katy Trail and the Katy Depot Museum, where you can see some of the models that I've also built in the museum.
Great.
Thanks, Ken, for the...
That just goes to prove you that there is some interesting stuff going on in flyover country.
Yes.
Sometimes you guys need to land in between coasts and check it out.
I'm trying to talk Ken
what do you
into
think?
coming to the train show in November, but...
I never have time to go anywhere. Chris, is there anything else you want to say before I close it out?
Yeah, I just want to kind of go over a couple of the train shows real quick. Just want to give a shout out to a few people from Denver that came up. Denver was, it really showed how healthy the hobby is. We had a line going around the block. I have a picture of that. Then just the inside of the Denver Mart Convention Center was just filled up with people anticipating to get into the show. Was approached by first Ken. he was wearing a Model Railroad Hobbyist T-shirt, and I have a picture of that. I'll show you that. Also, we have Wayne from the UK that came up and said hi. Hello, Wayne, if you're watching. I have a picture of him. He came up over in Denver and was really. It was great talking to him. Put him on the phone with Ken over at Caboose one day, and then from Denver, I was over in Edison, New Jersey, and there was like 30,000 people that went through Edison, New Jersey. I was just blown away.
My name is Richard Rainier, and where is Ken Patterson at?
Saturday and Sunday, same amount of people. Had a great time chatting with everyone. A gentleman came up to me, Captain Bill. We answered one of his questions. Actually, Daniel did. I have a picture of him. And that's just kind of like a brief synopsis of all the shows that I've been to so far. It's been 3 months of almost nonstop train shows, going from Cincinnati, doing an in-shop visit over at DCC Train. Shout out to those guys. They were really awesome. We also did a podcast live from Rob Gruber's layout there in the basement. So kind of winding up a train show season for me, and I'm kind of glad to be back home here. Otherwise, I'd be joining you tonight. So
it's like an old familiar song. All the manufacturers that I've listened to for the past 20 or more years, it's always the beginning, middle of March when they can't wait to get back into the offices and just get off the road.
Yeah.
Because for this industry, that is the busy show season.
And it's when us train show producers start mailing out literature for next year's shows. So
you bet.
It's awesome.
You bet. Oh, and one more thing. I do have some footage of the Rapido booth over in Denver. They made an announcement for the B36-7. I took some close-up videos. We'll kind of roll that through as I talk about it.
Thank you.
Got to join them over at the booth. It was an awesome
Jason's
model.
a cool guy. All those guys are
They're all really nice guys over there, but they did a great job on that model. I'm excited. I'm going to be putting up for some of those too. So.
Well, that's awesome, Chris. So with that, it looks like we're going to close out this Saturday, March 17th, podcast number 29. It's time for us to go run some trains. I got Mike Buddy with me, Ken Byrd, Dirk Reynolds behind camera, Chris Palomares, thanking you once again. And thumbs up, thumbs down, readers' comments. We really want to look at your questions and comments as always. And again, thank you very much for watching, guys.
Thank you.